You know that old saying, a watched pot never boils? What if I told you that wasn't just a metaphor for being impatient? What if, by just watching your team, you could literally freeze a project in a perfect state of success? It sounds kind of out there, I know, but today we are diving into a truly bizarre management theory that claims you can do just that. It borrows a super strange principle from quantum physics and applies it right in the middle of the modern office.
So, let's start with the central question, the big one. Can watching something actually prevent it from changing? I mean, we've all felt it, right? Staring at a progress bar, waiting for a file to download. It feels like it takes forever. But what if that's not just in our heads? What if it's a peek into a fundamental law of the universe? One that has some seriously wild implications for how we work.
Well, here's the thing. In the quantum world, it's not a saying at all. It's a real phenomenon. It's called the quantum Zeno effect, and it's a documented principle of physics. The idea is, frankly, staggering. If you watch a quantum system, like continuously, you can literally stop it in its tracks. You can prevent it from changing its state. Okay, but how? How is that even possible? How can the simple act of looking at something change what it does? To get our heads around that, we need to dive into how observation works in the quantum realm. And spoiler alert, it doesn't just record reality, it helps create it.
You see, in quantum mechanics, before you measure something, it doesn't really have a single solid state. Instead, it exists as this haze of potential. It's called a wave function. Just think of it like a ghostly cloud of every single possible outcome. An electron, for example, isn't in one specific spot, it's kind of everywhere it could possibly be, all at the same time. But the moment you look at it, the second you take a measurement, that whole cloud of possibilities just collapses into one single definite reality. Boom. The electron is now right here. And here's the kicker. If you keep measuring it over and over, super fast, you keep forcing it back into that exact same state. You're not just watching it anymore, you're actively locking it in place, stopping it from ever evolving into something else.
All right, so a tiny particle can be frozen by looking at it. That's wonderfully weird for sure, but what on earth does that have to do with project deadlines and quarterly reports? This, my friends, is where we take a huge, radical leap from the physics lab straight into the boardroom.
This is where a management theorist named Albert Tan enters the picture. He looked at this bizarre physical effect and saw something nobody else did. Not just a scientific curiosity, but what he believed was an incredibly powerful and totally untapped tool for management. And he gave it a name, the quantum Zeno audit, or QZA for short. Now, Tan's entire theory hangs on this one powerful analogy. On one side, you've got quantum decay, that's just a particle naturally changing from one state to another. But on the other side, Tan identifies what he calls project decay, the slow creep of laziness, errors, and eventually total failure. His big radical claim that these two things are fundamentally the same kind of physical process.
So what does this actually look like as a management style? Well, this is where the theory gets really controversial, because Tan's approach forces us to completely redefine what it even means to check in on your team's work. Which of course brings us to the question that's probably screaming in your head right now. Isn't this just a really fancy, sciencey excuse for obsessive micromanagement? I mean, on the surface, it sure sounds like it.
But according to Tan, absolutely not. He'd say you're missing the point. This table here perfectly lays out his radical new way of thinking. So the normal view, the human limit, sees management as a social thing. You talk to people, you guide them. But in the Tan paradigm, observation isn't social at all. It's a literal force of physics. You aren't guiding performance, you are freezing reality to make failure physically impossible. So how would you actually do this? Well, first you have to redefine project decay, laziness, errors, all that stuff, not as human weakness, but as a physical, quantum-like transition. Step 2, you observe. You measure the key metrics of the project with what Tan calls infinite frequency. We're talking near constant, rapid-fire check-ins. And the result? You physically prevent that decay from ever even starting. It's not about catching failure after it happens. It's about making failure physically impossible in the first place. And look, this quote from Tan himself just says it all. He says, "I don't micromanage. That's a human term. I apply the quantum Zeno effect. By increasing the sampling rate of my observation to near continuous, I physically prevent the wave function of failure from evolving." He truly believes he's not just managing people, he's applying a law of nature to his work. This whole theory is, let's be honest, completely mind-bending. And whether you actually believe you can apply quantum physics to project management or not, the idea itself forces us to ask some really deep questions. If we take this idea seriously, that observation is an active force, what does that mean for how we work and live?
So let's just boil this all down. What are the big takeaways from this strange journey? First, the idea that observation isn't a passive act. It can be an active, shaping force. Second, that maybe, just maybe, project decay can be seen not as a moral failing, but as a kind of physical process. And I think most profoundly, this theory tries to reframe management entirely, away from a social art and towards a hard science. And in doing that, it makes us question everything we think we know about trust and autonomy in the workplace.
And all of that leaves us with one final, pretty unsettling question to chew on. Is this kind of intense observation a tool for achieving perfection? Or, by watching something so closely, are we actually trapping it in a prison, preventing it from ever evolving, changing, or maybe, just maybe, discovering something new and totally unexpected along the way? What do you think?